Oh gosh, I've got a lot of funny and awkward date stories. The second one seemed much more normal. We chatted for quite a while, and he seemed very pleasant, kind of nerdy, which is kind of my thing. I like nerdy guys. I tend to go along with them well. I'm not exactly the most athletic person myself, so I don't really want somebody who is excited to take me to sports ball games all the time. Nothing wrong with that, but it's just a mismatch of interests. I prefer someone who wants to go to the bookstore with me, you know? So anyway, so we actually talked quite a bit, like, over the phone. We even video chatted once. Everything seemed pretty normal. He talked about how he'd had a fiancée pass away, like the year before. And, you know, he'd kind of told me some of that story, but not, like, too much of it, because we hadn't even met in person. And I was like, wow, that's so sad. But, you know, he seems like he's gotten over his grief for the most part, and, like, whatever. So he invites me to come to him for a date, which, like, now that I'm older, I know that you're not supposed to do that, but, like, I didn't have a lot of people to talk to about, like, the fact that I was online dating. I didn't really want to talk about it much with some of my friends, and then, you know, anyway, so I went to him. Because also, you know, you don't want the guy picking you up and then getting stuck. So I was like, well, okay. But I did not realize, I didn't, like, look at the map until I'd left. And he lived really far away. Like, an hour's, like less than an hour, but, like, over 45 minutes away from where I lived. And it was in a part of town that I was not super familiar with. So I get there, and I realized that it's, like, an incredibly not super safe part of town. And at that point, I've committed enough to have driven that far. I've already talked to him several times. I've even video chatted with him. He seemed pretty harmless. I've not really ever told this story to anyone. Because it's a little embarrassing for me that I did it, you know?
You just feel dumb for doing it?
Yeah, a little. And it's an involved enough story that it's never been, like, a good party story, you know? It's more of, like, a story time. And I'm not really in the habit of telling you, like, I'll tell you the funny stories, but, like, just the super humiliating stuff.
I think it's interesting.
I know, but I'll only tell it to you, like, if I have a reason to. It's not just going to, like, come up because I'm looking for something fun to talk about.
When you did this?
24-ish.
I think that's young enough to just try to get the naivete.
Right. Like, and I hadn't dated much. I'd had long-term boyfriends who had found me very organically. Like, I'll tell some stories about them another time. But, like, I'd never done any kind of, like, blind dating. And so I thought that was just kind of how you did it, you know? Like, okay, well, don't get into their car, so I guess I'll drive. And I'd already learned a lot from bad ex-boyfriends, but I hadn't learned everything, obviously. So anyway, so I get there. It's, like, it's like a really sketchy part of town. I also lived, though, in the worst neighborhood in, at the time, Irving, Texas, which, like, so we had, like, fairly regular gunfire, and occasionally, like, we had, like, one time we'd had a police chase, like, through the yard, like, just past my balcony. And so I guess I just sort of was, like, not inclined to judge him for the neighborhood he lived in, because, like, I also, like, if somebody were to come to my neighborhood, they would have had a very similar impression. But I also, because of my neighborhood, was very familiar with, like, just how sketchy it was when, for example, if you don't know this, if you live in an apartment complex where it's gated, but the gates are never on their rollers, they're constantly out of order, and every time they fix it within, like, 24 hours, it's broken again. You have drug dealers in your neighborhood. Because they don't like giving the code and dealing with the hassle of telling their clients, like, how to get through the gate. And so they'll just knock it off its roller so that people can get in and out without having to deal with that. That was what I learned in my first 2 gated apartments. Allegedly. So anyway, And that was the case. So I get there, like, gates off its rollers. It looks like an old motel that got turned into an apartment complex. We're in a completely foreign side of town that I'm not familiar with. It's just like in a direction I never go. Like 45 minutes in the opposite direction of like the things I usually went to. So I'm already like, okay, hope he's nice. Then I guess his phone was not working properly. So I was getting like occasional text messages, but he wasn't able to answer his phone. And I'm waiting, and I'm like, man, I've already committed enough to drive this far. Red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag. So I just, like, sat waiting, and, like, because he kept, like calling and then, like, losing signal or whatever. And I was like, oh, my gosh. So he finally comes out, and he's like, sorry, I was having a fight with my roommate. And he was like, but my other roommate was wondering if he could join us. And I was like, okay. Because I was under the impression from the conversations we'd had that he was excited to have a date. And I was like, okay. So they get in the car, and I'm like, so where are we going? Like, where would you like to go? I don't know anything on this side of town. He's like, oh, I don't know. And I was like, okay. I'm kind of losing patience at this point, but now he's in my car. And he's, like, very slight of build. So I wasn't terribly concerned at that point. And he looked kind of, like, posturally meek. Much more likely to spend a lot of time indoors than, punching a punching bag or something. So I was, at that point, not terribly concerned for, like, my safety with him. And his roommate came across as incredibly shy and socially awkward, and, like, completely unaware of the fact that he was crashing a date of some kind. So, at that point, like, I was like, oh, okay, I need you to pick somewhere to go. And he was like, okay. And so he picked, like a Denny's or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it was a lot like Denny's. And I was like, okay. He was like, yeah, I have a coupon. I was like, okay. So at that point, I'm kind of starting to surrender to this will be a good story someday, but I'm not expecting anything out of this, like, meeting. But I'm too nice and too polite to ditch this guy. So I go along with it, and I drive us to this Denny's Waffle House type place. It wasn't a Waffle House because the, like, interior decor was darker, but I don't think it was a Denny's either. So it was like an off-brand Denny's, because it was worse than Denny's, but not quite Waffle House. And Waffle Houses can be charming in their own way, but they're not a first date place, especially with your roommate crashing. Duh. I'm not really telling anybody anything with that. Sorry. I am getting a lot of progress here, but it's also kind of slow going. So we eat, and he's nice. Ultimately, it is a lot like the actual conversations we had over the phone. Like, he does seem very nice. So then he's like, I was thinking we could go over to such and such, kind of like a local amusement park, like very small, like putt-putt, and, I don't know what you call that. But, like, had, like, putt-putt and batting cages and stuff like that. And he was like, I thought we could go play putt-putt. It's really close to here. And I was like, oh, okay. It sounds like you actually do have a plan a little bit. So that was nice. And I was still just, like, so people-pleasing that I was like, I'm going to see if I can make this work and give him a good chance and da-da-da-da-da. And so we go over to the putt-putt place. And at this point, I have established he's probably not a serial killer or anything like that. So I am like, okay, I'll just, maybe I can have fun, salvage the gas I spent getting over here, and at least enjoy myself for a minute, even if nothing's going to happen with this guy. So we go play putt-putt, and he's starting to get, like, more comfortable. His roommate is just odd. So odd. It was a while back, so I can't remember any real details of the oddness. But I think the weirder part was that the guy that I was meeting seemed completely oblivious to how odd his roommate was. And somehow that was almost more, like, weird to me. And I gotta say, it's almost to a fault for me, but for me to consider someone odd, we're already several notches past where, like, your average person would consider somebody odd. I have a very high threshold for odd behavior. I work in mental health. Like, I'm very strange myself in much of the time. I'm possibly neurodivergent. I don't really know. I'm not like going to TikTok diagnose myself, but I was tested several times in elementary school and high school and middle school, and they basically were like, if she has it, it's not severe enough that you are like practically required to medicate her. So like they let my parents just kind of decide, and my parents were like, okay, we're going to not medicate her, and we're just going to not hold it against her if she can't get the best of grades. And that was the choice they made, and so I never really like went further with it, but like pretty sure I'm at least ADHD. But anyway, so like I'm a bit of an odd duck myself a lot of the time, and a lot of my friends are odd, and so when I say somebody was very odd, like we're talking very odd. And I would, if I thought it was just like some kind of a disorder, I would probably be saying like I felt like it was such and such. No, these people were just like weird. Like, okay, they didn't blink often enough. And when they talked, both of them, when they talked and they gestured, see how I do this? Something about the closed fingers mixed with the not blinking enough equals a disconnect. It feels like a cyborg a little bit. So anyway, that's just kind of like, just to give you a mental picture. So we go putt-putting. The most agonizing 9 holes. Just at that point, I am just like dragging through this date. But like, I need to give him a ride home. I don't want to offend him too much. I want him to have a good time because we're probably not going to go on a second date. I want to, like, I kind of have like an internal rule that's a bad rule, but like, I kind of have an internal rule that I want to spend a minimum of the amount of time I will spend getting to and from a place at the place to make it worth the drive. So basically double the distance in time is how long I want to stay there minimum, just to feel like I got my money's worth out of my gas, which is a terrible like meter for whether you should stay somewhere that's awkward. But I was young, that's all I'll say. So the whole thing is so cringy. So then he's like, let's do the batting cages. And I was like, I've never held a bat in my life. Sounds like fun. Am I going to get hit in the face? And he was like, no. He was like, I'll help. So then he attempts to do that thing that you see in movies all the time when a guy is a heck of a lot smoother, where they'll like come up behind and be like, here, you're holding the bat wrong. Let me show you how to do it. And he started trying to do that, and I was just like, and I just like stepped away, and he kind of caught it and was like, oh, okay. And that kind of killed it. So pretty much like we did like one round of how, like whatever the correct, like the circumstances of that game is. And then we just like called it a night, and I just took them home. I was like, I got a long drive, so I gotta get going. So I get home, and he, texts me something, oh, I had a good time, hope we can meet up again soon, blah, 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 blah. And, like, at that point, too, he had sort of talked a little bit more about he had kind of opened up on the date about the fiancé that had passed away. And he was like, yeah, like, we met online, and she lived, like, several states over, and I finally, I bought her a ring, and I proposed, and she was going to fly here to meet me, and then she was planning on moving here to marry me. And on her way here, she was in a car wreck and died. And her roommate called me the next day and told me what had happened. And at that point, like, I'm like, oh, you got ghosted and probably catfished and possibly scammed. That makes a lot more sense, and also is not the sweet, charming, like, nearly widower tragic story of a man with lost love, so much as like either you got catfished / scammed, or some girl was nice like me, and then you got weird and she got creeped out and she played dead so that you would go away, because and that second scenario became more my theory pretty quickly, because he would not leave me alone. Like, so I I told him, like, after I got home, he was texting me, like, oh, I had a really good time, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, it was nice. I don't think that I'm interested in a second date, but it was good to meet you, and I wish you the best of luck, and you are a very nice person. I don't mind if we, like, remain Facebook friends or whatever, but I'm just not interested in dating you. Thanks. And he did not like that, and, like, texted me a lot until I finally had to just block him on all mediums. And luckily, that's all it really took, because it was still primarily digital. I'm not going to call that a relationship. Connection, whatever you want to call it. Acquaintanceship. It was mostly digital, so all I had to do was block his number, block him on Plenty of Fish, and block him on Facebook. And that was the end of that. But he did just get, like, really obsessive after one meeting in person and, like, maybe 2 or 3 conversations over the phone. Like, there were longer conversations, or I wouldn't have driven that long, and I wouldn't have given him so many chances. But they were just 2 or 3 conversations on the phone. And I was like, I think that your quote-unquote ex-fiancé got scared because you got creepy. Like, overly attached creepy, too. Like, not... hard to explain, but it's not the same thing as, like, certain more imminent threats. I've had those kinds of dates, too, but, like... Anyway, so... So, yeah, I ditched him, and I learned my lesson, and that was I went ahead and deleted Plenty of Fish after that, because I was just like, I think I'd rather have a mutual friend of some kind, or maybe, like, paying for a profile narrows it down to people of slightly higher caliber. So I just decided until I could afford a better dating app, I was going to go ahead and just not try the online dating thing. And then, not too long after, I met somebody that I was sort of interested in at my church, and that didn't end up working out, but it led to me meeting my husband through kind of hilarious circumstances. Let me know in the comments down below if you want to hear that story. So it never ended up being a thing. But yeah, so that is my Plenty of Fish adventures in learning that one of my friends was a racist, and ex-friend now, and an apologetic one at that. I guess they all are. And then meeting my first fedora-wearing neckbeard who takes 3 baths a day. And then, you know, the world's creepiest date ever with someone who didn't blink enough. And probably got ethically ghosted.